Okay, we are back for Davos Part 2. Let's keep going. Um, we then have the cut in the action. That night, Davos woke to pounding at his door. Who? He shared the chambers with Rebecca Glover and Wax, but both were asleep in their beds. After rubbing the sleep from his eyes, the Onion Knight rose and stumbled to the door. On the other side of it stood the wildling, bundled in furs. Um, it may not be realistic that they'd be sharing a chambers. I mean, after all, there seems to be plenty of room at King's house, but we needed Rebecca Glover and Wax in the same room. We needed the wax tablet in the room. So I'm sure no one really noticed. I'm like the only person that probably like is like, oh, thinking about this. But yeah, I mean, maybe they all feel safer in the same chambers. Maybe the chambers are big, but they're in there purely because we're going to have the wax tablet thing later. My Lord Seaworth, will you step out with me? Osha asked. Before we sail off, I have something to show you, and you have something to see. How could he say no? So Osha is actually a very difficult voice to write to. She is always trying to be clever. She's always saying something that's somewhat wise. And so there's always something to she's never straightforward saying something. There's always something kind of mystical about where she's coming from, like, oh, you're having these dreams, maybe you should be listening to them and things like that. She's a little inconsistent. Sometimes she uses O apostrophe, sometimes she doesn't. George isn't perfectly consistent with her writing. She does go from um, and there are a handful of times where she's fairly direct, but most of the time, so it was one of those situations where it's like, how do you write a character that's a little inconsistent? But we went with the there's always something interesting or wise or clever about everything she's saying, because that's just the way she always speaks. So she can't just say, I have something to show you. She has to say, I have something to show you and you have something to see. There has to be something a little more to her voice. After finding his boots and wrapping himself in a thick fur cloak, Davos followed her through the halls of King's house. They made the climb up to the central stairs and the main gate. It was open. Davos had yet to see it closed, and the guards only nodded at them as they passed, nowhere to escape to. And we established before that there was nowhere to escape to, so they just are able to go out. And so they emerged from the tunnel at the edge of the weirwood grove. Outside it was bitter cold and dark beneath the canopy of leaves. He liked it less here than he did beneath the earth. At least below, he was warm while the trees watched him. So, it seems that the trees have faces above the ground too. To his relief, the woman moved quickly, and Davos had to follow at a jog. From the grove, they crossed the bailey in silence, past giant shadows that could only be unicorns grazing, and descended down to the port. Here we haven't really revealed. It's kind of a slow reveal here on what the unicorns look like. We kind of like hear them snorting, and now he's passing them in shadows. It's just we don't want to throw it all out here. Plus, just time wise and how the story is moving, there's no time to pause in the early part, right? In the early part, he's dealing with the creepiness of the room and the bride and the rite, and then we're dealing with the creepiness of the feast. You don't want to break that up and all of a sudden have this description of unicorns. The same here, like he's running to follow Osha on this, where she has something mysterious to tell him. We don't want to stop this and have like paragraphs on what the unicorns look like. So we just get a kind of brief mention of them. But also we're establishing kind of the environment here, because it's going to come back later when he does the kidnapping. The stars the stars made the water on the bay shimmer. Waves lapped at the shorelines. Pieces of driftwood flowing back and forth in their rhythm. At the docks, bundled stoneborn guarded the great cogs the Magnar had prepared for the morning tide. We had to go with like the right size ship in order to get the soldiers there and back in 3 trips. It's this kind of idea. The three ships are Lord Vermalar, Laughing Reese, Annalyn's Dream. These are our three protagonists from In the House of the Worm. They eventually meet Groff as well. But the three friends are Vermalar, Reese, and Annalyn. Annalyn being a character that's very much like Jamie. Reese does laugh. Lord Vermalar, I think Vermalar is more upper class, but they're all kind of upper class. But nonetheless, these ships are named after In the House of the Worm. Annalyn's Dream being at the end the reconciliation of the surface people and the grounds through kind of intermarriage. That's that the peace is his dream. Peace and integration is his dream. Annalyn's Dream. Davos and Osha followed along the shore. At first, their feet fell on black sand, but soon after, sand became rock and rock became boulder. When they came to a cliff face, the wildling hoisted herself up. Black sand is this idea that this is all basalt. This is a kind of volcanic island, so there's going to be volcanic kind of rock around. The wildling hoisted herself up the stones of a great tumble, one after the other, until she reached the top. A tumble is something George sometimes says when he talks about a big group of rocks. He followed, though nowhere near as swift, so the roughness of the basalt stones stinging his hands as he climbed. This is the idea of, just giving some atmosphere here. If your hands are cold, it kind of hurts to be going on something like basalt, which is porous and sharp. It was flat atop the bluff, and they had a clear view of their surroundings, the Weirwood Grove, the port, the ocean, just again establishing what everything kind of looks like. Osha walked over to an outcrop of rock that had formed into a 10-foot high arch. She gave it a sour look as if its presence offended her. So we've got this arch, this big rock here. Just the shape of rock, Davos thought, wondering why it bothered him so. He had seen the like on Dragonstone. It's true. Dragonstone also being a volcanic island, Davos is going to be familiar with this. Septon Barr said the smith had his forge far below the earth, with the fires that would so hot they would melt stone into a soup called magma. Magma is used by Daenerys, so I was like, I guess this is a word they would use, strangely enough, even though there's not much volcanic activity in Westeros except on Dragonstone and maybe Skagos. Originally, the submission had this being Pylos or Crescent, but it didn't really make sense that they would be talking about the smith. It would be Septon Barr, who was the Septon on Dragonstone, so that got switched up. But here, now and again, some mountains spewed the liquid stone, just as a man did a seed. Talking about semen again here. And sometimes the rock would cool in the oddest of shapes. Asha finally spoke. I guess you could kind of look at it as like Davos's offspring would be becoming others, which would be cool and odd. Osha finally spoke. I told you how I ended up looking after the lordling. No, she always calls the lords Bran and Rickon lordlings. She had over the past weeks. They'd shared a number of stories, and this is just establishing they've been together for weeks now. I guess it would be trying to think. Yeah, he goes there. He has to travel with her. Then they have to go up to King's house. So it would be at least 2 weeks that they'd be together. You came into the Stark service after they captured you. They showed you mercy. A lordling's mercy for me and a wolf's mercy for my sister. So what I like about this is when you think about, so in case you guys don't remember, when we meet Osha, she's traveling with 5 companions, Stiv, Wallen, Haley, and 2 unnamed people. We don't know who the 2 unnamed people. We don't know if the unnamed people are Night's Watch or wildlings. They're just unnamed people. Stiv and Wallen are Night's Watch. Haley is a wildling. And I always thought it was kind of like very rushed that she's all of a sudden gone from like the Starks slaughtering all of her friends to being like the Stark loyalist, you know. And she kind of they play on it a little bit. Like Theon trusts her because he's like, well, she shouldn't like being a captive either. But then she's actually very loyal to Bran and Rickon, and Lewin for that matter. So I always thought there should be a little bit more bitterness here. And so you can kind of see that, you know, the wolf's mercy for my sister, because the wolf ripped apart Haley before her eyes, you know. Davos was taken aback. Your sister. And this is just, we're adding some color here. We don't know Haley's story at all. So she's just like, might be Haley was only my half sister, but that was enough. She was only half eaten, and that was enough too. You know, you got to tell the story in sort of a clever way, because the dialogue has to be clever because it's Osha. Davos can speak straight, but she's got to be, you know, it can't just be like, oh yeah, she was killed by she was killed by the wolf, and right in front of me. It has to be something else. Might be Haley was only my half sister, but that was enough. She was only my half eaten, and that was enough too. There has to be something clever to it. I'm sorry, Osha. And so here we're going to add some emotion and backstory to Davos, that he had lost a sister of his own too, Dora. There's some discussion of whether there should be a name in it should be a name from Davos's life already. Like, for instance, his ship is called Black Betha, and we have no idea why. Should it be Betha? But I was like, I'm going to save the Dora thing. I'm going to save the Dora name for something else in the future. So this is just a named thing. Dora is just a made up name because it's alliterative to Davos. But that had been a long time ago, and it was far too cold to get into all of that. So maybe we'll get into it later. He wondered why the wildling was telling him this now. And here we get the full story of Osha and Haley, which I kind of think if we ever get the Winds of Winter from George or whoever, that we'll never know about. That will never be revealed this. But that always bothered me. It's an interesting story. Like, why does Osha and Haley know these two wildlings? Why are they passing by Winterfell? How did they cross the wall? How did they get past the wall? All of these things. And so here's the full explanation. And why does she go to Skagos? You know, like she's all these things. So here we get the full story. It was Haley's plan to get south of the wall. Wasn't much of a plan, truly. We got cozy with some rangers who flew down from Eastwatch and let them do all the work. It's true that we know that Osha was in a romantic relationship of some sort with Stiv, because she compares Gage to Stiv. The Black Grows don't have women, you see, so they're as lonely as striplings. A stripling is like a young man, and young men are always lonely. And we let them save us. The Lord of Bones is after us, we cried. And you Southerners are always looking to play at being knights. So, you know, try to have some cleverness to what the women are doing. And he says, "I am a knight." He might have said, but instead he only said "I." Our crows in love were Stiv and Wallen. Wallen's voice annoyed me, so Haley took him and convinced her cousins should come along. This was a late addition that convinced the cousins to come along. Like, should we explain what these other two guys are? How do we do it quickly where it's just they're there? Because it was six of them. Who are these other guys? Well, they're Haley's cousins. You know, okay, fine. That was it. Stiv was mine. He was a big fellow who liked that I was smaller than him, but I knew I could kill him if I wanted. There's a little bit of how she describes Gage and things like that. When she describes her relationship with Gage, she's not exactly complimenting of Gage. You know, she kind of understands that Gage is forcing himself on her, but she's just like, well, his hands smell of flour and he's not as rough as Stiv. You know, you're like, oh, that's not much of a compliment, but you know, it's kind of the same thing. Like, there was a big fellow who liked who was smaller than him. because we know that he was a little rough with her. Um, but I knew if I could kill him if I wanted, like explaining why she would tolerate it. You know what got him on the wall? Davos shook his head. Smuggling. Anyway, we thought this was a clever way to kind of explain how they got around the wall, that they actually had a ship, that he was a smuggler, and then it connects back to Davos. Though Stiv wasn't no lord at it like you. Still, he went and got us a sloop. A stupid name for a boat. Had again, have to pick the right size boat. A sloop is a small sailboat, but it served. He said Eastwatch was only a danger so far as Cutter Pike could see. So the six of us sailed the long way around Skagos. This is to having Skagos, like why Osha would choose to go back to Skagos, is that she's been there before. Stiv knew the water before he was black, and he traded with the Stains. They have kind souls, the Stains, with no ill will towards free folk or runaways. It's why I took the Lordling back here, just trying to simultaneously explain like Osha's story for coming south and why she would bring Rickon to Skagos, of all the places. Like if you had Rickon, would you take him to a cannibal island? Like, or back north? Like, it's you met some of them, and then bringing in what we're talking about here with the Arch. You met some of them. They love to prattle on, don't they? Retelling the same stories. Well, they had one tale that was different about the Magnars. A tale that would make me happy. That makes me happy. I'm taking the Lordling away from here. She walked closer to the stone arch. It's here, just like they said. He took a step forward to get a better look. The arch was pocked and jagged, much like all the rock around them. It was beautiful in a way, but hardly the stuff of hearth tales. Hearth tales is something that what Ned describes as like ghost stories. What did they say it was? A gate, she said. A black gate, they called it. So this is putting in an explanation as well of what the Black Gate was that Bran runs into. It's a sacrificial gate is the explanation. Like why does this Black Gate exist? It's still a mystery today of what the Black Gate is and why it was there. In a way, it's just like a mechanism for Bran to get beyond the wall, but and something to make Sam Tarly useful. But here we're adding a little more that there are black gates to sacrifice children to the others. And you know what's past them waves? Through the stone arch, he could see all he could see were seeing stars. That's the ice dragon to our right, which means we face northwest. A sailor should know this. Past the horizon is the Isle of Skane, and beyond that, north of the wall. And yes, if we look at the map, that's what we're going to see. Do I have a thing available here? Where's my map of the north? That's not that important, but nonetheless, if you look on the map where the little bay is for the at the bottom of the bay, if you go northwest, you hit the Isle of Skane, which is uninhabited, and then past that would be north of the wall. Here it is. So here is our in the little divot of the misshapen heart or whatever, you can see like to the northwest would be the Isle of Skane, and then Storald's Point. So it's all there according to our map. The sailor knows his maps. Aye, it's the true north. In truth, sailors didn't have that many maps. Certainly not in the medieval period, but it's certainly it's more of a age of exploration kind of thing. Come the 1500s, but nonetheless, here we're just going to say that they have a whole bunch of maps because It's the true north. The true north, obviously, Ygritte calls north of the wall the true north. So here we're going to have Osha do the same. My home. The Magnar sails from here, landing on Storald's Point. On maps, it's called Storald's Point. I suppose the Wildlings are going to call it the same thing. But, I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense that the Wildlings and everybody else, Westerosi, have the same name for the same place, but we're just going to have it be the same. My people have spied his sails, black sails, smugglers' sails, bringing back the smugglers. He trades on the point, but not with the free folk. So there's this idea that, the smuggling aspect keeps coming past here. Davos had seen Storald's Point with his own eyes back when he served on the Cabalcat. Who then? This is all established in A Dance with Dragons, that yes, he has been to Storald's Point. Asha shrugged. Giants have no need for unicorn horns when mammoth tusks prove better, and the children of the forest have more dragonglass blades than hands to wield them. The idea is that what would they have here on the island that everybody else would want, that wildlings would want? Well, they've got unicorn horns and they've got dragonglass because it's a volcanic island. But that's about it. What would the wildlings want from anybody on Skagos? So that's why he trades with the White Walkers. What would the children of the forest want? What does Skagos have that the children of the forest want? Nothing. What do they have that the giants would want? I mean, giants have got mammoth tusks, which are, ivory is, really useful, easily carved and made into great weapons. So why would you want a unicorn horn? The others. Somehow Davos felt even colder. He had heard talk at Eastwatch of whites. This is true. He had, people, obviously the Night's Watch is going to be talking about whites, and then Melisandre does kind of think about that she's going to battle something darker, the Great Other, she called it. This is all true. They don't ever talk about the others. Davos shouldn't know about the others except from stories, but he should have heard of whites and the Great Other. But here we go, the monsters of song. It was hard for him to believe, even for a man who had seen shadows come to life. And that's kind of a lampshade. He's obviously seen supernatural things. For him to be like, the others, oh yeah, of course, because we live in a world filled with magic. And I've seen magic, but, we're kind of lampshading it here by putting it, hard to believe in for a man who'd seen shadows come to life. He stared long and hard into the sea. What would the Magnar want from them? Were they from him? And this is Osha's figuring it out. So the stains. It's hard because there's Stain, the people, and then there's Skane, the island. So she's piecing it all together that Craster was sacrificing babies. Here they're offering something through a black gate for the others. What do the others want? Well, from Craster, they want babies. So it seems like here that they want babies. This is all linking it to the Lord's right to the first night and all of this. There's a man in the north named Craster, if you call him a man. Osha spat. Shunned by the free folk for allying with his kin, but the Black Croats don't think him all that bad. Or don't think his hearth is all that bad, which is the truth of it. Stivivia met him. Said he had 24 daughters and just as many wives. A little inaccuracy. I mean, she's just saying it. I mean, he has daughters who are not old enough to be his wives, so he does have more daughters than wives. But we'll this is, you make a little mistake for some linguistic eloquence. He had 24 daughters and just as many wives, but no sons. No sons. It was an odd thing to have so many children of a kind. So one of the things that it kind of bothers me in the story is that George R. R. Martin will just throw in characters having a whole slew of children, all of the same sex, which is just like Oberyn Martell has 8 daughters. Like, really, 8 daughters? 8, it's one thing to have 3 daughters or 4 daughters, but 8 daughters, no sons. It's the same with Davos. he has 7 sons, and you're like, okay, really, not a single daughter. There's far too many of these characters in the story, so I wanted to undo it a little bit because he's hearing about no sons from Craster, because obviously Craster has no sons, and everybody's like, well, that's weird, because he has so many daughters. But we never make the comment about Davos or Oberyn, right? So this is kind of undoing it a little, having a little more explanation. So Davos is going to say it's an odd thing to have so many children of a kind. Davos himself had 7 sons, which men said was well past lucky, but he rarely spoke about his misfortunes. So we're saying that Davos didn't just have 7 sons. He had 7 sons and 2 daughters. There had been 2 daughters as well, each stillborn. And then we bring it back to Dora. He'd always planned to name a daughter Dora, but the day never came. And there's a sadness to this, right? And we're bringing in some emotion and some sadness. Like he lost a sister that's clearly bothered him. And he wanted to honor the lost sister by naming a daughter after her. But then he lost his daughters, which would be, you just think about how like painful this would be for him. That each of these dead daughters reminds him of his dead sister. And I mean, it's painful by itself, but also reminding him of Dora. Just bringing in some emotion and some pain. These boys, what are you saying happened to them? Osha looked exhausted with him. You lose your ears with your seed, Lord Smuggler? This is the thing, is like, you're not putting the pieces together. I mean, the pieces together are, they're sacrificing the babies to the other. That this is why they're producing these children during the rite to sacrifice to the others. And she's just like, what? You can't figure it out? But there's a little more exclamation point to something when you make somebody figure it out for themselves rather than just explaining it. It's funny, a lot of times when I do these chapters, most people get everything in it, but there's always a comment every once in a while, like, I'm confused. Why is this and this happened? And, usually somebody responds, but I'm always like, you couldn't have figured it out. You couldn't have thought about it just a little bit more. Like sometimes it's like something really obvious, and they're like, oh. So here, when someone discovers something for themselves, it's more powerful than when somebody just explains it. So Osha gets a little exclamation point here. You lose your ears with your seed, Lord Smuggler, which also links it back to his Lord's Ride to the First Night thing. She shook her head. Go back to Driftwood Hall if you want to hear the same story over and over again. Just breaking it back to the stains. She started the trek back to King's House without him. When Davos got to his chambers, he found Robert Glover and Wex still sleeping. Light streamed in from the hallway, and he removed his cloak and boots. It was then he spied the wax tablet resting on a carved wooden table. He had forgotten it till now, but he was curious to know. What had Wex written at the feast? What had Glover read? Davos took the tablet in hand and read it for himself. And remember that Davos can't really read very well, so he's going to be sounding things out. In truth, actually, in the past, people usually did speak when they read and when they wrote, because they understood that the rhythm of talking reveals the rhythm of natural talking reveals whether something is good writing. And if this is something for writers, if you read your work aloud, it's very helpful. But they used to always read everything aloud, knowing this. Silent reading is kind of a new invention, past few hundred years. But he says, Kin, he sounded out whisper quiet because he doesn't want to wake everybody up. Kinslayer. So the Kinslayer thing, what's great about this is that, like, okay, we're explaining the Theon situation here because Wex is talking to Robert Glover about Theon Kinslayer, about his fears, and that's all going to go that way. But Davos is reading it, not understanding, and he's going to read Kinslayer, and what does he think? Well, that he's a Kinslayer, because it's going to be his child that's going to be sacrificed to the others, right? So the Theon's Kinslayer fear ends up being a little worm in Davos's head. So linking these things. The next morning, his companions took ship for White Harbor. Hundreds of Stoneborn sailed with them, packed under the Magner's 3 cogs. It would take 3 trips to sail the whole army to White Harbor, Davos figured, and he wondered whether he would join any of them. I'm trapped here for a moon's turn, he reminded himself, mayhaps 2 or 3. So yes, we have the cogs. The idea is that, we're talking about hundreds of unicorns and 1,000 men, more than 1,000 men. So, we don't want to, shove them all on the same ship. So maybe I shouldn't. I made it great cogs before. I wonder if great cogs is a little too big, but maybe they just didn't want to be packed on. So it's fine. Cogs can be different sizes, but there was time, too much of it. And here we get a big shift in the story. So here things slow down and we're lulled into the sense that maybe Davos is enjoying Skagos, and when really the Kinslayer idea is in his head. But, idle time. Sailors were no strangers to idle days. How many of his have been wild beneath limp sails? But when the sea was windless, he'd have the luxuries of dice and tiles and the gossip of the men. Yeah, the tiles and dice we hear about as different games in Ice and Fire, so they're here. On Skagos, he had only himself, and poor enough company that is. Alone, the tunnels filled his days. There were scores of them to explore, and as he walked, he made a game of it, finding faces in the roots that resembled men he'd known. This is going to come back because he's using the roots as to map out the underground. Davos spotted one with a yellowish hue, dubbed Lamprey. So Lamprey was one of the guards that he had on Dragonstone, and he thought Lamprey had a yellowish hue to him. A plump little root near his chambers, he lay named Lord Bar Emin. Lord Bar Emin is a fat teenager. Then there was the thin one outside the armory. The one with the wild laugh. Salador-san is a thin, smiling man. It's good to see you, Sala. Yeah, we all call him Salador-san, but in the story, Davos calls him Sala. Deeper boredom led to deeper ventures. There were darker levels to King's House that only a few servants called home. Deeper still, levels where no Stoneborn lived at all, and they didn't waste the oil to light the torches along the walls. Davos took to carrying his own. The roots were faceless this far down, and the rooms were doorless and empty. So this is idea that during the long night or other previous time, that this was all filled with people trying to survive the cold weather, and that this was a subterranean community, and then they kind of came out, which is why he talks about like the dawn of days and them coming out of the ground and keeping with the Lord's right. Like he's in their ancient times when they're all beneath the earth. Still the burrows sprawled on and on and on, like an ant colony long since abandoned. On his deepest descent, the corridors shifted from packed earth to solid stone. So the idea is he is into the bedrock now. Here and there, he found sigils carved into the walls, stripes and circles that looked more like runes than heraldry. So this is the idea that he is now down to where the past civilization was. Whatever civilization existed before the long night, the idea is that it's very different and it's advanced, and they've got different runes. The stripes and circles, if you want, I left it open that if it's a theta, because this is kind of getting into the House of the Worm, where Annalyn goes deep and he finds the sigils, and the sigils of the ancient people were the thetas. But this is just this, kind of a play at that. Like, it doesn't have to be that, but I'm just, leaving it open, stripes and circles. But just the idea that the ancient civilization down there was very different than the medieval civilization that we have today. So he says, curiously, there are no lobsters of House Magnar nor any other sigils you know, because this is a different, more advanced civilization. As he leaned in close to inspect them further, he stumbled over a stone and dropped his torch. Oh, mother of mercy! The torch rolled and sputtered out. It was black, endlessly black. So this is what happens to Annalyn in the House of the Worm as he goes deep, and then he loses his torch and it goes black, and he nearly goes mad. Um, and so the same kind of experience happens to Davos here. He's doing the same Annalyn journey here. This is all in reference to In the House of the Worm. And so for a moment, panic gripped him. So you've come to love the fire, a voice whispered in his mind. In A Storm of Swords, when Davos is in prison, the torch is the thing that keeps him sane, and Melisandre comes and is like, well, I can just take away this torch, right? And he's like, please, no. Oh, and she says to him, so you've come to love the fire. And so this idea is that ignoring the thought, Davos advances with his arms until he found the wall. It was warm and rough and reassuring to the grass. It's warm because of the geothermal, volcanic heat. I don't need the torch, he told himself. Then this is kind of a strength thing for Davos, right? In A Storm of Swords, he was scared of the dark, and Melisandre is taunting him because he loves the light and he's scared of the dark. And so he's saying, I don't need the torch. I don't need the light. I can make it in the dark. This whole thing is kind of a metaphorical moment of strength and growth for Davos. Follow the wall back. So he did, letting his shortened fingers skim the stone as he went along. Arya does something very similar in Game of Thrones. You know, if you're in a maze and you put your hand on one wall, as long as there's no islands, you will solve the maze eventually. So, shortened finger reference, Arya kind of thing, solving the maze. And he walked slowly on towards nothing. Sometimes he thought he heard sounds around him, scrapes and scurries. And though he stilled himself and strained his ears, he could never be sure if he'd imagined them. Annalyn has the same experience when he's dark in the thinking he's hearing sounds. After what felt like an entire day's slow, blind march, finally Davos saw the dim light of an upper level spilling down into the stairwell ahead. When he ascended to the top level, he was dripping with sweat. You find Gorn's Way down there, a guard chortled at him, slapping him on the back. Davos burst into relieved laughter, though he couldn't say who Gorn was. This is obviously a reference to the wildling story of Gorn and Gorn's Way. So here, Skagos, they've heard the story, so Davos has no idea what he's talking about. But the idea is that somewhere beneath the earth there are tunnels that connect everywhere. So he's maybe we'll bring Gorn's Way back into the story eventually. On the 23rd day was the second launching. Though through the steam of his breath, Davos watched hundreds of Stormborn sail off again without him. Part of him had hoped he would be allowed aboard, but that was a foolish thought. Even if the bride was with child and suspected as much, he could not be certain. Not yet. The Moonblood might only be late. And what if she isn't with child? He wondered. The Magnar could keep him here for months. What if they fear she will miscarry and keep me till the babe is born? That would make it near a year. So he's kind of realizing that, oh my God, this might take a long, long time. Plus, like, one thing that's never mentioned, what if it's a girl? What if it's a girl? You know, like, what happens then? They're kind of assuming it's going to be a boy. But what if it's a girl? He strolled ponderously across the bailey, taking time to marvel at the unicorns digging for grass beneath the snow. This is the idea that, you know, everything's snowy here. How do animals survive? Well, they dig in the snow for the old grass. The likeness of these beasts made in the south had little truth to them, contrary to the devices on shields. Living unicorns had far less in common with horses than they did with giant boars. So this is this idea that the unicorn is actually one of these animals. I've been shown different versions of it. Some of them are huge, some of them are smaller, but the idea is that the name of them is what, Siberian unicorn, but what their real name is something like, here's another one, you know, different ideas on like how big this animal was and how big the horn was, but shrunk them a little. I think what's the real name? Um, I think they're called elasmotherium, but this is what the unicorns are. Is this? Um, And so, yeah, they have less in common with horses than they did with giant boars. They were lumbering beasts with a heavy hump between their shoulders, goat-like beards that dragged across the ground as they grazed, thick, shaggy coat that made their legs look short and stubby, and their bodies were absurdly round. At least they have the horn. That which was true. It wasn't straight or thin or spiral, but instead a thick and curved thing like a giant fang, wide as a man's head at its base before rising to a point. Yeah, some people are like, shouldn't even be bigger than that. Why does a man's head? Shouldn't, it depends which picture the people show. People are kind of unsure about the horn size, so I made it a little more realistic. I mean, I don't know. There's recreations I've seen where the horn is just like outrageous, but um, anyway, the master of unicorn found him there. Groff was a small man with a short stubble and a long gray hair tied back beneath his heavy hood. Groff is also a character from In the House of the Worm. The two men spoke of shaggy beasts for the better part of the morning, and Davos learned much and more of their nature. Though slow to start, unicorns could gallop as fast as a horse, but could not jump or move sideways. Their charge was powerful and deadly, making fences useless. So the bailey was instead surrounded by a great moat, save for by the port. We couldn't have it by the port because he has to do the run, right? And most importantly, they were bred for winter, staying warm beneath their fur where a horse would freeze. So this will all be useful information later as the unicorns are heading to White Harbor and might be seen in battle sometime in the future. The women were out collecting the unicorn's dung in great bushel baskets. It was a vital resource, Gruff explained, once it was dried. So this is very kind of getting to like the kind of inner Asia idea of how important dung is. And so, if you spent time in Kazakhstan or Mongolia or anywhere in inner Asia, you kind of, that like dung is just used for everything. I mean, they cook with it, they keep themselves warm. It's incredible. So this idea that they're doing so much stuff with unicorn dung. The small folk use it for their cooking fires and to heat the hovels and caves. As for the castle, dung fed its furnace, warmed its ovens, filled each and every hearth. Even the hedge wizards and herb women made use of it in salves and potions. So yeah, the hedge wizards are mentioned a few times throughout the story. I think there's even hedge maesters, but there are hedge wizards in Ice and Fire. It's actually kind of the term in which George R. R. Martin gets hedge knight from, as he finds hedge wizard first, or hedge I forget if it was doctors or something, but he's just like, I'll use hedge knight. It's like Irish kind of term. Hedge teachers and things like this. Salves and potions for the sake incense burned to warn off illness. But of course, we're establishing like the tools that Davos is going to use for his kidnapping plan. Like this all seemed like, oh, nice and fun. Unicorns, unicorn dung, back world building. But it's actually Davos scheming. Groff taught him how to approach a unicorn without spooking it. Before long, he had one eating corn out of his gloved hand. In the afternoon, Davos was shown how to saddle the beast, which was one of the smaller and tamer ones. Soon enough, he had mounted the thing and was off. He and Groff spent the next several days riding together, and Davos could understand the joy of it. We're almost forgetting about the horror of Skagos here. He'd never cared for the feel of a horse beneath him, but a unicorn was somehow different. There was not so much up and down, The beast instead swaying and rolling like the deck of the ship. This is this idea that the sailors always don't like horses in the story. And there was a feeling of power atop a beast so large, which made even a beginner's careful canter feel intoxicating. One day they went hawking. It was the first chance he'd ever had to try the sport on any mount, because he's new. He's not of, he's not been hanging out. He's lowborn. He's not been hanging out hawking like Sansa. But isn't it the time for the Lord of the Rainwood pick it up? Lord of the Rainwood. See, sometimes it's Lord of Rainwood, and sometimes it's Lord of the Rainwood. Lord of the Rise, the Lord of the Rainwood, but I think just checking. Yeah, it's also I trust you, my Lord of Rainwood. So he uses both the Lord of the Rainwood and Lord of Rainwood, but it's the Lord of the Rainwood most often. And here we get to the story of the goshawk. So Stannis tells a very important story about the goshawk, and the goshawk. Stannis calls it Proudwing. He finds a crippled bird and he nurses it back to health. And his older brother Robert mocks him as the goshawk doesn't fly very high, and everybody tells him like, you're wasting your time with this goshawk. And Stannis is using it as a metaphor for the Faith of the Seven. Like, what am I doing with the Faith of the Seven and this goshawk? And this is the thing, is that Davos meanwhile has this religious awakening with the Faith of the Seven. So this is kind of a very important tale about what's going on here. And I don't know how much George R. R. Martin actually knows about hawking, but I had read a post once about where someone who did know about hawking was like, yeah, Stannis doesn't know what he's talking about. Goshawks are used for completely different kind of hunting as falcons. They're for like low wooded areas, and they're more stealthy. Like they don't fly high and get the whole view of the lay of the land like a falcon and go diving. They're completely different kind of bird. And so I'm kind of taking that post that I read and taking it, using it. So Groff is using the goshawk. Well, Davos has been led to Merlin. The Master of Unicorn's bird made Davos remember a story Stannis had told him once. So Davos, and remember, the goshawk represents the Faith of the Seven. Okay, this is the whole part of this, the whole metaphor here. You prefer the goshawk, Davos observed. May I ask why? His sig is a good bird. His sig that name is the name of the rat from Dark Where the Tunnels. Greel's rat is named his sig. This is why the bird is his sig. Said Groff, caressing its plumage. He flies low and stealthy and catches more prey than any falcon can in a thick wood. All correct. This is why the goshawk is used. Which do you like? And Davos laughed. I don't know enough for preferences of my own. I was only told a tale of a goshawk is all. Did the man who told it hawk often? We're talking about Stannis here, right? That made Davos think. I'd never seen him go, no. But he said he did when he was a boy. Groff sniffed. My lord, begging your pardon, I find experience begets wisdom, while boys beget folly. So essentially what we're saying here is that Stannis didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. His goshawk was fine. The one thing that about the story that's a bit weird is that all the other characters around Stannis tell him that he's wasting his time with the goshawk. And they should at least know, because I think an adult tells him it. Their great uncle, Sir Harbert, told me to try a different bird. I was making a fool of myself with Proudwing. So Sir Harbert, I mean, his great uncle essentially didn't know what the fuck he was talking about either. Okay, this is the whole idea, is that Stannis, Robert, they all didn't know that the goshawk actually has like it's completely fine. It's a great bird. It has its purposes, um, which is, and of course this is the metaphor for the faith of the seven, that Stannis doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about when he's saying that he should abandon the faith of the seven. So we're talking about Davos's mind here, Davos's faith. Um, he says, "Well said. Mayhaps I should take this grown boy hawking if I see him again and teach him the truth of the hunt." So this is Davos getting a little more confident. Here he's saying, "Yeah, I need to tell Stannis that he was wrong." And by saying this, he's saying that he needs to reintroduce him to the faith of the seven, and that's an important thing for Davos. "Mayhaps, my lord, on the matter of experience, I have a question for you, if you'd be so open." It's about Carolee. Carolee is a character from In the House of the Worm. Carolee looks like Annalyn, and Annalyn is completely egocentric, so he wants to bang her because she looks like himself. This is the Jaime Cersei thing that's clearly been lifted from George onto George borrowed from himself here, but Carolee is. And then he gets really jealous because Carolee goes and she bangs the meat bringer, and they want to kill the meat bringer. Anyway, Carolee, Davos gave him an uncertain look. "Who?" "My new wife," Groff returned, just as uncertainly. "The Wright's bride. Did you not know her name?" So this is the whole thing. You see at the beginning of the story, he imagines like, oh, the husband must want to strangle me. Turns out, didn't care. The guy did not care. Davos was abashed, though in truth, I mean, he's kind of an old man anyway, Groff. Davos was abashed, though in truth he had not wanted to learn it. The less he knew, the easier to forget. Getting back to him trying to forget the whole thing. "We've barely spoken," he admitted. "I had no idea she was your wife. Did you have to beat her to get her to perform?" the master asked. "No," said Davos, nonplussed. "She was quite willing to do her duty." "Good." Groff seemed relieved. "I couldn't get my first wife to perform without threatening the lash. I pray Carolee will serve me better." There's a little, what happened to that first wife? We don't know. Anyway. Carol, again, it's not such a great society here. The third launching came on the 51st day, and with that, the last of the soldiers were off. Once again, Davos was left behind. His seed had yet to quicken, or at least no one had told him if it had. Now, even if tomorrow brought certainty the bride was with child, it would be weeks before one of the Magnor's ships returned. And what if she's barren? Would he ever leave? He brooded all the way back to the castle gate, where he saw women foraging for mushrooms in the weirwood grove. An old crone waved him over, and he spent the morning learning which fungi were edible and which to avoid. And this is again part of his plan. Though most of them carried quick death in their caps, Davos found them beautiful, with hues of every color of the rainbow and more besides. This is what the beauty of what blooms in the rot. One white mushroom released spores that women powdered their faces with, just some makeup. The green one was pressed for oil to feed the castle's torches. This is the secret one, because that he's actually paying attention to. The indigo one, when minced, brought strength to a men's member. I would have had used for that one because he was having trouble getting it up. But in fact, it's the second one that's the important one. When the bushels were full, the women brought him down to the kitchen, where the cooks boasted of their talent at length before showing him how to prepare for the hall. Over the following days, they revealed other secrets too: how to fry spiders so they'll be crisp but not chewy, how to make blood bread rise when it bakes, how to render unicorn tallow. So now Davos is secretly stealing knives and getting unicorn tallow, which is going to be very flammable. And though it nearly made him gag, Davos even learned how to draw fresh milk from the flesh of grubs and worms. It's all distraction from what he's really doing. One morning in the kitchen, he heard news of the Celsail's arrival. The Krolls had finally delivered the surviving crews of Salvador Sands, Aledo, and Old Mother's Son. That we do hear about these ships crashing in a feast for crows and a dance with dragons. There were only a score of them left, and they were dragged forth in manacles and chains, each more gaunt than the last. The lot had obviously been beaten near to death. This is Davos has some willing. These guys are not going to be feeling too good about the Skagosi. Wrecked on Kroll land, one of the cooks said. It was to be expected. They wouldn't let their shoulders be dishonored. Davos found Sand's men resting in their chambers. Their wounds had been treated with dung and bandages. This is bringing back that the dung is used for everything. And they were each given a hearty breakfast of mushrooms and sliced unicorn stones. By unicorn stones, I'm meaning these are unicorn testicles. We chose the word stone to refer to them. They're eating mushrooms and unicorn testicles. They're beaten near to death, and they're like, here's your breakfast. Some unicorn testicles. There's a lot of dark humor in here. One looked up from the plate. The Onion Knight, bugger me with Indros's cunt. The joke here is that Indros is a hermaphrodite and can switch. Indros is a god of lice. Keep in mind, the Salvador Sand is Lyseni. And so the Sand's men are going to be a lot of Lyseni Celsails. And Indros is a deity in lice who is a male by day and female by night. And so the idea is that Indros's cunt is Indros's dick, right? So he's getting buggered with her cunt because the cunt and the dick are the same thing. Okay, there's I don't know if anybody got this like this, but bugger me with Indros's cunt is yes, like Indros changes sex, and so she's getting buggered with Indros's cunt, which is Indros's dick. Yes. It was the 76th day when the Magnar summoned Davos. Our efforts have been answered, he said from his weirwood throne. He's on his throne here. The bride is with child. You have our thanks and our friendship, Lord Seaworth. Tomorrow you may depart. When the sun rose, Davos was already wide awake. As they crossed the Bailey, he and the Celsails were flanked on either side by an honor guard. Leading them was none other than the Magnar himself, bundled in a thick unicorn cloak trimmed with sable and carried atop his palanquin by 8 men. Wind and water give me strength. This is something he said before. Wind and water give me strength, and the mother too. So saying, the mother is going to give him strength too because he's now a more religious man. Out of the corner of his eye, he could already see it. Don't look. Let them call attention to it. The fire is already going. But the guards were too focused on the task at hand, making sure not to drop the weight they bore. A unicorn in the Bailey snorted and stamped, but still the guards looked only to their lord. At the docks, Annalyn's dream was alive with sailors preparing for the voyage. So this is the one that comes back. The captain came to the prow and bowed before his lord, and only then did anyone take notice. The werewoods! All at once the guards turned and saw the pillar of smoke rising from the grove. A moment later came the crash as they dropped the palanquin, sending the Magnar to the earth with a whimper. Most of the guards left their fallen lord and raced back towards the trees. Davos followed. Across the Bailey, he could see the Stoneborn pouring out of the gates of King's house, buckets in hand, men and women, guards and servants. They screamed commands to one another, well panicked. This way and that they ran, searching for the source of the smoke. None paid him any mind. So he's got the distraction. He's burning the trees with the tallow and the oil. Reaching the castle, he went straight down into the tunnels. Davos raced through the labyrinth of corridors, remembering the path he'd learned to take. And here he'd learned this path, but we also get, the people of his life and the experiences he's had. He veered left at Edric Storm's smirk, right at King Stannis' scowl, and left again at Maester Cressen's wince. He spotted Sir Andrew, ran past Pylos and Lord Godric and Alistair Florent. There was Maria and Wex and Princess Shireen. Melisandre cackled. Queen Sleece frowned. Patchface screamed. Dale, Allard, Mathos, Merrick. this is that these his sons are haunting him. He arrived, catching his breath. Davos stood before the door. There was a root above it that marked it for him, etched in the face, drawn into a smile. Doris' smile. So all of these people in his life and the ones that he's lost and the pain he's feeling, and this is all leading him to this. Inside was the girl, the new bride, the one the Lord of the Rainwood had lain with every night since the feast. And this is the thing, you kind of don't know what he's done. Like, did he tumble her again? But no, he went in every night to make sure he was going to get her pregnant. And there's a real darkness to this. Like, every night he's like, I'm going to make sure that she's going to get pregnant, get off, and I'm going to get off this island. Carolee looked at him in confusion and then with fear. There's a fire, he said. Come with me. He grabbed her by the wrist, and she went with him easy enough. They were among smoke and tumult as they emerged from the earth again, so they went unnoticed. Near halfway back to the port. Too much luck, he thought. Expect a storm. This comes back. Again, like, too much luck, expect a storm was when they got caught in ice. And sure enough, the girl began to scream. She attacked him suddenly with a fear of blows. I wanted Davos to get some real injury here. Davos gave her a hard yank and quickened his pace. Her hand clawed at his face, and he felt a blaze of pain as her nails dug in deep. Davos ripped her away and twisted her body around into a hug and pinned her both of his arms. She wriggled violently and bit his shoulder, but his furs were thick and he could stand it. He hoisted the body off the ground and carried her legs kicking in the air. Oh, the unicorn horn blew in the distance. They were coming. Some people noted that the only two horn blows, and that they'd be waiting for a third, like, shouldn't there be a third? I guess it's Rangers returning. In truth, I didn't have a place for the third one, but I guess you have the expectation of the third horn. His thighs burned as fast as he could manage. The docks loomed larger, and he could feel blood streaming down. I mean, it's because she just clawed his face. Warm at first, but colder with every step. But it's cold air, so it's just feeling cold blood on his own face. When he came to the docks, he saw the Magnar still lying on the ground. His throat had been slit. The bodies of guards and sailors were sprawled all about him. The sight sent the bride into a new round of shrieking. So, I don't know if Davos wanted to kill the Magnar, but the Salladhor Sand's men did it anyway. Salladhor Sand's men were now the ones readying Annalyn's dream to sail. So they've armed with the knives Davos had smuggled from the kitchen. They had overtaken the Stoneborn crew with ease, pirates to the bone. The horn sounded again, and Davos could hear hoofbeats. So now the unicorns are after them. He hoisted Carolee onto the gangplank. I mean, this is all very similar to Theon with Jane Poole. He hoisted Carolee onto the gangplank, and a pair of sails grabbed her. Others sped to untie the ropes that moored the great cog. Just as the first arrow struck the ship's side, as they raced up the gangplank, another arrow took Davos in the leg. He fell forward, slamming his face into the gunwale. So he's just bleeding and now just bashes his face into the gunwale. Before he could tumble into the water, a sailor grabbed him by the arm and hurled him up onto the deck. The sails were pulled tight, and the ship lurched forward, sending the gangplank spinning into the water. So the gangplank's they're going. So they're going, and the gangplank's just spinning. The ship listed and hit the dock with a thud. They're not going out slowly. They're just pulling the sails and going, knocking the sailors off their feet. Save me, gentle mother, Davos prayed. His leg burned. His face burned. Hellish sounds were all around. The ship's side tearing against the dock. Arrows piercing the hull. Unicorns calling out, save me. And then all of those terrible sounds drew back, leaving only the beautiful ones. Only beautiful ones. The wind and the waves. So this is, Davos he's a sailor, so these are beautiful sounds for him. The squeak of ropes and the snap of canvas, the laughter of sailors. For a moment, he forgot about all his pain and simply listened to the song. When he felt it was safe, Davos pulled himself onto a knee and peeked over the gunwale. In the distance, he could see the weirwood grove still burning. To extinguish the fire would be no small task, not with wood soaked in mushroom oil and unicorn tallow, and the branches packed so with dung. he and Sal's sails had been work all night. Had been at work all night. And here we're bringing it back. It's the gates of Dragonstone again. Davos Seaworth thought he was letting the gods burn. Of course, not his gods, but the old gods here. So it's quite, that's the thing is this came up pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. Davos gets a lot more confidence to face Stannis, confidence with his faith, confidence to on what he wants, what he thinks is right. And now he has knowledge about the others and the sacrifices and things like that. And so next he's probably going to take his ship to Eastwatch by the Sea. It's the closest kind of area. So his escape. So, but anyway, that is Davos. I hope you guys enjoyed it and liked all of the Easter eggs and the time and care that we put into it, because there's a bit there. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.